Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. I am Alina Islam, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very excited to present Solis Minerals to you today, a company focused on advancing a portfolio of early-stage copper assets in Peru. To talk about its current project pipeline as well as upcoming plans, we have Michael Parker, Executive Director. Once the presentation is over, we will conclude with a Q&A session. So please put your questions into the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can at the end. But before we get started, I do need to mention the fine print. For Solis Minerals, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this webinar. Please read the cautionary note on page 2 of the Solis Minerals corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this webinar does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Solis Minerals specific disclosures. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Mike. Please take it away.
Hi, Alina, and thanks very much. Good evening from quite a chilly Scotland. Suddenly got very cold in the UK, where I'm based at present. Thanks, everybody, for joining the webinar, and we'll go through the presentation. As Alina mentioned, we can have some questions at the end. And as mentioned, this is a webinar that contains some forward-looking statements for purposes of the stock exchanges. I'm the QP for Canada and the CP for the ASX. Obviously, the copper market is looking buoyant in the future. This is one way of presenting that with various figures. I think it's more relevant, perhaps, to mention this last week that Mike Henry of BHP mentioned a need of $250 billion of investment in copper in the next 10 years. And in fact, BHP are on their roadshow in Chile this last few days and have mentioned investments of $14 billion to secure and expand their copper production in Chile. So obviously the copper market is viewed as a market that will grow and is essential for the future need for critical minerals as we progress towards a transition. Solis Minerals has 4 board members. I'm one, I'm the executive director. Christopher Gale is a well-experienced mining executive, had a great deal of success with Latin Minerals in Brazil, recently sold the lithium asset there for $600 million to Pilbara, the hard rock lithium guys from Western Australia. So Chris is very experienced, has a lot of history and success in the mineral exploration world. Shafika is very experienced in Latin America, Brazilian by nationality originally. She has a lot of experience in ESG and dealing with the various ways that mining companies interact with their stakeholders. Kevin's a very experienced financial manager who has worked for quite some time in the banking sector. Myself, I'm a geologist. I worked for 10 years in DRC and over 10 years in Peru for First Quantum Minerals. I have had some exploration success. I discovered 2 copper deposits in Congo, Lonchi and Frontier. I'm quite keen to continue that success with Solis Minerals. So we're a very experienced board. Company overview, market cap of about 8 million. These are all Australian dollars. We have 103 million shares fully diluted. There's about 8 or 9% in Solis management hands, 15% in Latin Resources. And we have about $2.7 million to hand at the end of August 2024. I'd like to spend some time on this map. I gave a presentation last week, and at the end, the chap said to me, "Where is Peru?" It didn't occur to me that people needed that sort of introduction. So quickly speaking, Peru is a large country on the western coast of Latin America, population of about 30 million people, a long history of mining. Mining contributes about 30% of GDP and about 60% of exports. Geologically speaking, if we look at this map, the blue there is the Pacific Ocean. That ocean, the rocks underneath it are pushing underneath the Latin American continent on the right-hand side, creating some heat, some magmatic activity, which wells up into Latin America and forms various types of mineral deposits, some of which are obviously well sought after and it's a very well endowed country in terms of mineral deposits. Peru currently is vying for second place in copper production on the world scale with DRC, with Congo from Central Africa. They're both producing about 2.5 to 2.7 million tons of copper per annum. And in this picture, there's probably about over half of Peru's copper represented by the various deposits and mines that are in this picture. We are focused in one main area, which is basically down here in the south. And we have 4 main projects down there, which I'll talk about. And we also have a project in the north, close to Lima, called the Canyon Project, which I'll mention later on in the presentation. I'm now going to focus in on the area in the south of this image. This area basically is around the town of Ilo, and Ilo is a center of mining activity, which has been the focus of activity initially by Southern Copper Peru and recently by Quellaveco, Anglo-American Quellaveco. Southern Copper have built a smelter and a refinery, and they have port facilities in Ilo, and that smelter and refinery serves its mines called Toquepala and Cuajone, and they basically rail the concentrates down and rail acid back up to the mines. So they have a complete circuit where they complete all of their copper production in one region in Peru, and it's quite a unique area in Peru. They've just announced about a $9 billion expansion to those activities, where they would build another smelter, expand Cuajone, and also build a new mine called Tia Maria. Quellaveco have started production probably about 2-3 years ago, and they actually truck their product down through Ilo and export it. Just in the south of this image, there's a small little port down there. That's where they export their product from. So one can see that Ilo and this zone is becoming very important in terms of mining production and mining growth, not only in the south of Peru, but in the whole of Peru. We have 4 belts, 4 targets in this belt. And in fact, I'll just go back to the previous slide and explain that there are porphyry belts that exist in Peru. The oldest belt is this green belt, which is closest to the coast. It's a younger belt further inland, and the youngest belt is even further inland. The big mines that we know, the big porphyry mines, are associated with the younger belts. In this belt here, we have Toquepala, Cuajone, Quellaveco, and Cerro Verde, and further inland we have Las Bambas and Tapacay. The belt where Solis Minerals is working, the coastal belt, is the oldest belt, and traditionally wasn't viewed as a very prospective area for large copper deposits, for 2 reasons. A, it wasn't viewed that the size of deposit could be generated would be big enough in the area, and B, because the area is covered by a whole series of later desert formations that have eroded off the mountains. This has been an advantage to Solis because it's left us basically available to explore this belt, which is underexplored, and there's lack of competition from the majors. The 4 projects I want to talk about in the south are in this area. We have Ilo Este, we have Chancho al Palo, and we have Chocolate that are shown on this image. All those targets are porphyry copper targets. We're looking for large tonnage, bulk mineable copper targets, and is usually associated with gold. In this belt, we have as well Tia Maria, which is in the northwest of this image, and just further north on the same belt, we have Zafranal. Now, I mentioned that the belt has been viewed as not very prospective for larger deposits, but it's interesting to note that Southern Copper is talking about production production from Tia Maria of 30 years at 120,000 tons of copper per year, which is 3.5 million tons of copper. And Zafranal, which is the tech project, they are mulling over a decision to go next year, and that will be a production of 125,000 tons of copper for the first 5 years. So obviously, the theory that this belt where Solis is exploring is not endowed with large resources is proving to be false. As more and more discoveries are made and more development goes ahead, it's quite easy to show that we are in fact able to discover larger deposits in the area. I'd like to start to talk about Ilo Este. And Ilo Este is a target that's been looked at before. It was looked at before by a company called Latin Minerals, Peruvian Latin Minerals. And that basically was a company that gave the project to Solis Minerals as part of the formation of Solis Minerals. Latin drilled holes in 2014, 2015, and you can see some of the intersections here that I mentioned. 400 meters, 470 meters of 0.11% copper, 0.9 grams gold from the surface. 318 meters of 0.13% copper, 0.1 gram gold from the surface. And 200 meters of 0.14% copper, 0.1 gram from surface of gold. Those are significant intersections. When I went to this permit in January, February 2022, I was blown away by the exposures. There is an outcropping porphyry copper system, and these holes that were drilled there have shown that there is huge potential in this permit. Obviously, these holes are not ore grade at this stage, but it's very characteristic of many porphyry copper exploration programs that one drills holes that don't quite encounter the core of the mineralization, but actually act as a guide to where the mineralization may be. So what we've done with Ilo Este, since Solis has taken over this permit, we've reevaluated some of the magnetic data, and we've done some satellite imagery where we've managed to detect types of rocks that are associated with porphyry copper from space, from satellite imagery, and zoom in on different targets. Based on all that work, we've selected an area in the south of the permit, which has not been drilled before, and we've done what's called an IP, or induced polarization program. This is a form of geophysics that enables geologists to identify areas that contain sulfides in a form that's characteristic of porphyry copper deposits. The sulfides are discrete, and they form in sort of small veins and spots throughout the rock. And IP allows you to detect that because you can charge those sulfides. We did those programs, and we found in the southwest of the area this very, very good chargeability anomaly. And you can see here these yellow indications on this map are where we are going to drill. And this anomaly is 1,200 meters long, by about 250 to 400 meters wide, and about 500 meters deep. It's also adjacent to a magnetic anomaly. The magnetic anomaly is due to the presence of magnetite, and magnetite is often a vector for porphyry copper deposits. So the indications look very, very positive here. We've done as much as we can in this area. We've done mapping as well. We have outcropping mineralization on surface. So the next phase at Ilo Este is a drill phase. One can actually see here these holes that are marked in blue, if I can show you with the pen. This one here, and particularly, I think this one here. Those are the ones that were drilled previously and have that highly anomalous copper mineralization, but they don't show any IP result, which means that we have more mineralization potentially. It's indicative we have more mineralization in this area of high chargeability here. One hole was drilled just off the edge of the anomaly. I believe it was drilled in the wrong direction, but it produced a remarkable result of nearly 300 meters at 0.21 grams a ton gold, indicating that there's something going on there which needs to be tested. So that's our primary target, and we're currently doing drill permitting, which is a complex process in Peru. There are many steps to go through, but we believe we should be in a position to drill by Q1 or at latest Q2 2025. Our initial plan is to drill 5,000 meters. That's a view of Ilo Este, basically looking from the middle of the area towards the west. One can see it's an extremely barren zone. There is no vegetation. It's a desert. Altitude is not high. We're about 1,000 meters above sea level. Here's a symbolic picture of the drilling that will go through the IP anomaly. The area is all owned by the state of Peru. There are no private landowners. There are no communities. And we basically have access, and which is, you can see a small vehicle there on the left of the image over here. There's a pickup truck. You can see also the image is quite rusty and red. That's from the weathering of sulfides on surface. So this is our primary drill target. Moving on to Chancho al Palo. Chancho al Palo is probably about 17 kilometers up the zone, up strike from Ilo Este towards the northwest. It's in a similar geology. It's not so constrained as Ilo Este because we don't have as much exposure of the geology here. There's a lot more sand, a lot more desert formations. Here we've done a similar sort of program as Ilo Este. We've done some magnetometry, which shows us where we believe the porphyry style alteration may be, and we've done some IP as well. And we have definite targets in the center of this image. We have a target which we believe is the principal porphyry target we'd like to drill. And on the left edge of this image, we have a zone that we call the IOCG target. We believe here that the copper will be more confined to large vein systems. Both those targets are very, very valid. And we'd hope to drill this in parallel with Ilo Este in Q1 or Q2 2025. Moving briefly away from the coastal belt, we go up to the belt which is close to Toquepala. In fact, this image, you can see Toquepala on the top of the image. We staked some ground in this area in about February 2022. It was held by a major. The major did no work. When we went back there, we started work there 18 months ago. We spoke to the community. They said nobody had been there for decades. Nobody had done any exploration. So we were the first people in there for quite a while. The geology is dominated by this yellow dashed line on the image, which is the Incapucu fault, a very large fault in the central and southeast of Peru. The fault is thought to have enabled the emplacement of Toquepala, which is there on the image, further to the northwest, Quellaveco, and further to the northwest, Huaconi. So we're very favorably placed, in very, very close proximity to the fault, and we have rocks that are very similar to the rocks at Toquepala. We've gone and done some mapping there, and we've basically found some very high-grade copper oxides in an area. You can see images of those rocks there. You can looking at malachite, perhaps some azurite. When we look at that geology, and you can see here, we found a zone with several high-grade samples in it. It doesn't look like veins that are very far from the source or very close to the source. It looks like it's a system that enables us to think it's a larger system. So we're investigating the geochemistry of these samples. We've seen that the geochemistry is very, very similar to Toquepala. So we believe that this is an indication of a larger system, and we'll continue to investigate that in this specific zone. Recently, we completed a drone magnetometry survey in the same area at Cinto. And you can see here what I mentioned before was those copper samples up here on the right of the image. The magnetometry covered all of the area. And what we've discovered is there are indications of high magnetic susceptibility or high response to the magnetism in the red, which you can see in the center of the image there, just below the CU, indicates that's a zone that has magnetite. But more interestingly, the blue zones above that and below that are areas that we believe have been subject to hydrothermal alteration, which may be related to some form of mineralization. What backs that up is those small patches you can see on top of the zone in the south are actually anomalies from remote sensing. We did some remote sensing over the area using the Worldview 3 platform. It's a very modern platform, very sensitive to these sorts of reflectances from mineralized rocks. And that tends to back up the fact that we have a large zone in the south of the main anomaly, which is a very, very prospective area that we want to basically inspect as soon as we can. I believe personally that that's more prospective than the area with outcropping copper to the north. We still have to do some IP out here. We'll do that as quickly as we can and try and progress this area to be drill ready as well, hopefully during 2025. This is the one permit where we have a community, the Charan Briar community, that we work with. We have a very good relationship with them. Our field staff are excellent at integrating themselves into the community. We have workers from that community and we do some outreach programs to them. But it's the only area where we do have to work with communities currently. Going back to the original two projects I talked about, I talked originally about Ilo Este and Chancho Palo. In between Ilo Este and Chancho Palo, an area became free in May 2024, and we went and staked that. We've called that the Chocolate Project. Originally, we called it the Guaneros Project, but we named it after the geological formation later, which is the Chocolate Formation. That area obviously has the same geology as Ilo Este and Chancho Palo, the same prospectivity, and we've gone out there and staked that and carried out preliminary exploration over that area. When we went out to Chocolate originally, once again, it's very easy to see on the ground the activity that's gone on before and whether people have visited there in the desert. We saw no tire tracks, we saw no footprints, we saw no samples. So once again, we believe we're probably the first people that have been on the ground out there in decades, which is exciting because it's a very, very prospective area. What we did at Chocolate was we did a drone survey, a drone magnetic survey. I've mentioned that at Sinto as well. Drone surveys are extremely fast and extremely efficient and ideal for these sorts of areas. It picks up the presence of magnetic anomalies, which can be a vector for the presence of alteration related to porphyry copper style mineralization. But what we have is we're in a unique position where we can compare other data from our other projects and get some idea of the response that indicates mineralization. And one can see here we've compiled the data from Chocolate, which is on the left, with Ilo Este, which is on the right. And one can see there's a broad zone of low magnetic response, which I'm drawing now here. That's probably related to the emplacement of some intrusives, the batholith, which are these red rocks in the bottom of the picture. They've basically destroyed the magnetic minerals as that emplacement has gone ahead. But then what's interesting is where you have an overprint of high magnetic areas, which I'm showing now here, that indicates that there's been some activity. Oops, excuse me. There's been some activity which has introduced magnetic minerals. And we know from Ilo Este that activity is related to the drilling, related to porphyry copper mineralization. So we can make the leap that the same effect is taking place at Chocolate, and in fact here at a place called the Southern Anomaly. Even though there are limited outcrops, we've gone out there and found some mineralization, some mineralized hornfelses with values of 0.37% copper and 0.14 grams a ton gold. That's very, very exciting. This area is obviously the start of an exploration program. There's a lot more work to do, but we'll accelerate this as much as we can and hopefully be in a position to drill there also before the end of 2025. So if we go back to the previous slide, we can see that three areas, Ilo Este, Chocolate, and Chancho Palo, form a highly prospective trend, at least 17 to 20 kilometers along. And we have two drill-ready targets in that trend, being Ilo Este and Chancho Palo, and Chocolate Project, which we'll develop as fast as we can to be another drill target. So it's a very exciting area to be working in. Lastly, but not leastly, recently we staked some ground close to Lima, actually 3 hours south of Lima, on the same trend, on the same coastal intrusive belt, where we have Ilo Este, Chocolate, and Chancho Palo. These rocks are slightly younger. We did this because we became aware from the geological record that there's various areas of copper oxide, small occurrences of copper oxide in a belt here. We have Almacen, Los Pinos, and we have Nispero, which tend to form a belt. And we know there's been some previous exploration, which is outlined on this image. We saw that there was a large contiguous area that became free, about 25,000 hectares. That costs $3 per hectare to stake. We've done that. And we would have probably up to June 2026 to review the area before we pay again. So it's a low entry cost to get exclusivity in the area. And we started to go up there and do some exploration. Now, our target basically is to try and see if we can find accumulations of copper oxides that may be in the order of 20 to 80 to 100 million tons, that may be able to be exploited in terms of a heap leach operation, a quick operation, quick turnaround, and quick revenue. Just, I mentioned at Sinto, we've done some community outreach. The community is very, very used to mining. They've received many, many benefits from Toquepala. They're in the Toquepala area. And they're used to the presence of the mining companies and how to interact with mining companies. We helped them refurbish their community hall. It was inaugurated on August the 4th. Very proud of that. And they were very pleased with our presence. This is a small symbolic or a demonstration of how we want to see our projects progress in 2025. You can see here that Hilo Este and Chancho, we want to be drilling by Q1 2025 or at the latest Q2. Sinto, if we do the work and manage to get the permits in time, we can be drilling there Q3 or Q4 2025. And Chocolate, we want to be drilling by the end of Q4 25. We have about 5,000 meters of drilling planned at Hilo Este and about 2,500 meters of drilling planned at Chancho Palo. That's the end of the presentation, but I've just added 2 more slides that we had a recent announcement. I think it was last week, Tuesday. We went up to Canyon. I was there about a month ago. And as I mentioned, it's an area that's been noted as having the presence of copper oxides. We went up there and found some exposed mineralization, and we found we had some reasonable grade copper, 0.74, related to high-grade molybdenum as well. So it's a bit different to Hilo Este and Chancho Palo and Chocolate, and those are all copper-gold associations. This is more copper-molybdenum association. And that's just a picture from Canyon. You can see there we have quite a coarse-grained granodiorite. You can see the malachite, which are copper oxides, which are leaching from in-situ mineralization and forming these layers and concentrations in joints and faults in the granodiorite. I think that just about concludes the presentation. Thanks for watching.
Thanks a lot, Mike. That was a great presentation. So we can get started on the Q&A portion now. Just as a reminder to our audience, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So, Mike, we've got quite a few questions here. I guess the first one, previously it was stated that Solis was looking for a flagship project. Where are we with that flagship process, as the current projects are not giving much value to shareholders?
Yes, Solis started with a project in Chile called Mostacel. I think that was in 2022. It's a copper project. It was drilled. It didn't show the results that we expected, so we reversed out of that, basically to preserve funds. We then went to look for lithium in Brazil, and we signed several attractive JVs with some concessions that had outcropping spodumene occurrences. Unfortunately, when we drilled under those occurrences, as often happens with lithium, with hard rock lithium, there was not much continuity to those outcrops, so we decided to end those JVs. I think flagship is a phrase that I would happily apply to Hilo Este at this stage. I think that Hilo Este has developed into a project which has all the indications of being a major exploration project and one that needs to be drilled. And I think all that technically at this stage there isn't a lot that is showing that Hilo Este is not a valid target. It is an extremely valid target, and obviously one that one would drill ASAP. It's our primary target for 2025.
Okay, on that note, do you have any geochem results from Ilo Este?
We do. We have some rock geochemistry results. I think we've published a couple in the various news releases. We do. We have outcropping mineralization above the area of the IP anomalies.
Okay. Okay. So how much cash do you have, and what is your monthly burn rate? And then follow up to that, what is your budget for 2025?
Our cash at the moment is probably, it was 2.7 million Australian on hand at the end of August. It's probably about 2 million now. Our monthly burn rate, I would imagine, is in the order of sort of 80 to 100K. So obviously you can only start the drilling with the funds we have to hand. There will be a financing, but the quantum and the timing of that has not yet been defined. But obviously to drill the targets you want to drill, there will be some form of financing.
Okay. Will Chris take on more of a role now with the Pilbara takeover?
Chris has always been very active in Solis. I think his role won't be modified that much. He'll always be there, managing and advising and doing as Chris does. He's a very proactive person.
Okay. A question on Ilo Este. So what is the cost of drilling, say, 5,000 meters? And will you require funding for further drilling at other projects in 2025?
I'm speaking Spanish. As I mentioned before, obviously the treasury isn't sufficient to meet all the drilling requirements we have in mind. So there will be a financing. As I said, the quantum and timing hasn't been quite defined at this stage. The cost of drilling in Peru is about $300 per meter. That's all in. Includes mobilization, demobilization surveys, interhole moves, and assays. So to drill 5,000 meters at Ilo Este is probably in the order of $1.5 million.
Okay. Would you be looking at other areas, other countries to add to your portfolio, or are you sort of happy with what you have in the portfolio at the moment?
Solis remains open to opportunities. We still have some land holding in Brazil, for instance. We're very open to any good projects that come along. Obviously, the team we have is very experienced and both technically and in the corporate world. So I think Solis would welcome any approach for new projects at this stage.
And is that commodity agnostic or focused on copper?
We're focused on battery metals, copper and lithium at this stage.
Okay. Just a question on drill permits, Mike, because I think you were supposed to get them Q3, then move to Q4, and now into 2025. So what's the status on those?
What we've done is at both Ilo Este and Chancho Al Palo, we've gone for the simplest drill permit, which allows us to have 20 drill pads. The procedure is quite complex, as most people know. In Peru, it's a process that involves many iterations and communications. We are now in a stage where we're just about ready to submit for Chancho Al Palo, and we should be ready to submit for Ilo Este well before Christmas. When I say submit, that means that it's gone through a process of meetings with the ministry. We've presented the ideas we have about drilling. They've come back with observations. We've corrected those observations and gone back to them. So basically, before they're submitted, there's been some toing and froing, which has ironed out most of the issues. We then have to go through a series of communications, which means we have to basically tell the people of the area what we're doing, who we are, what we're doing. That's done in this case, because we don't have communities, it's done by radio transmissions and some publications in the local newspaper, and then we can submit the drill permitting documents as the final stage. The actual approval process is meant to take 10 working days. Obviously, it never really does, so we will allow 2 to 3 months for that process to take place. We've advanced the access to the surface process, so that once the drill permits are approved, we should get fairly quick access to start drilling. That's why I say we leave it between Q1 and Q2 2025, taking into account that permitting is a complex process in Peru, but we believe we've done it in such a way that we've addressed most of the problems that may arise.
Okay. This could be the last question here, Mike, but what can make the company more exciting? There seems to be little interest in your stock at this time.
I think the excitement around the stock is that we have excellent targets. We have targets that have gone through a whole series of exploration phases. We're in a great area of Peru. As I mentioned, there's a lot of activity in that area with Southern Copper, with Anglo American. There's two major mines going to be coming on stream in the next 2 to 5 years, being Tia Maria and Zafranal. So I think in terms of geographic location, we're really in a great position. I think in terms of technical progress, SD has been very well explored, and we're at a stage now where we have an excellent target. Has many indicators which are very positive. It needs to be drilled. So I think that's obviously exciting in terms of the technical aspects. Chancho Palo equally has some great targets there that need to be drilled. I think we're in a great location, a great address, and we have some real quality targets. So I think that for me is very exciting.
Okay, great. I think that's it for the Q&A portion of the webinar. Mike, thank you so much for taking time to host this webinar with us today.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks very much. And obviously, we remain open. Any more questions that may come through a bit later, just send them through to us. And happy to answer those. As you mentioned, the presentation's on the website, and anybody that wants to get in contact with me, they're most welcome.
Okay, great. Just as a reminder to our audience, our next webinar will feature electric royalties, and that's tomorrow, November 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a great day.